Since the very first video on my channel, Payday 2 has been a title that I've kept a close eye on. It's not something that I've played religiously or tirelessly scoured internet forums for information on, but it is one that's fascinated me. A game with a player base that almost overbearingly supports their pastime is amazing, and having developers that recognize that is even more so. There's of course been controversy regarding their copious amounts of DLC, their general interactions with their player base, and their more than questionable means of rewarding their community. And if you've been keeping up with the news the last few days, you've probably already heard that Payday 2 now has microtransactions. Really, this is standard fare, developers do this sort of thing all the time, but there's more to it than just the inclusion of mere cosmetics or flowery gun models. For those of you that are totally unaware of what's going on, Overkill, the developers of the first-person heisting game Payday 2, run an event every year for the anniversary of Payday's release called Crime Fest, an event in which the developers reveal new features and unlocks for the game over a period of 10 days. This year marks the 4th annual celebration of Payday's release, and with it, a load of new features and free updates. One of these new features was the addition of the Black Market, a new system that allows players to unlock new skins, mods, and more. Essentially, it's the same approach to microtransactions that Valve uses. In addition to getting cash and gun mods at the end of a heist, you can now get safes that contain one of a few specific skins of varying rarity for a few specific weapons. But unlike skins for Counter-Strike Global Offensive or Team Fortress 2, these ones have stat bonuses tied to them. The safes can, again, much like Valve's titles, only be unlocked by utilizing keys, or in this case, drills. The drills can either be purchased from the Steam marketplace for anywhere from $2 to $3 or, after an insane amount of backlash from the Payday 2 community, can be randomly and extremely infrequently earned at the end of a heist. While most gamers get rightfully upset at the idea of microtransactions that offer bonuses to those who can throw down the money, it's even more disappointing specifically for the Payday 2 player base. Not only did Overkill release an update that almost completely changed weapon stats and made the builds that some players worked tirelessly to unlock obsolete without these new skins that cost money to reliably get a hold of, but they also went back on their word. Numerous times, members of Overkill publicly stated before and after the release of Payday 2 that it wouldn't have any form of microtransactions. Shame on you for thinking that. But lo and behold, at surface level, this might seem like the only thing there is for players to be upset about, but there's so much more to Overkill and their owner Starbreeze that's been going on over the last few months. This is only the icing on the cake.
Robbing banks and getting paid.
Overkill have been a major advocate for supporting their players and keeping the community happy, and that includes the modders. In the past, they've promoted player-developed mods and even supplied modders with some assistance to ease the creation of their mods. But with a single recent update, Payday 2's modding scene was flipped on its head, and some user-created additions have become completely unusable. Overkill updated the game for the start of Crime Fest, and in the update they changed the way some of the API functions are accessed, making them unavailable to modders. The only workaround for this change is to write code to perform similar functions in x86 assembly. For comparison, this is an example of what modders typically program with, and this is an example of what they'd have to use to get around these new changes. This major alteration has resulted in many of the modders for Payday 2 that relied on these now inaccessible functions to outright quit, or notify their users that the next version of their mod may take an incredibly long time to come out. The developers of Project Canary, GoonMod, and HawksHUD, the most popular mod for Payday 2 just to name a few, have all been affected by the changes of this update. And Overkill, the company that prides itself on its community support, has not reached out to the developers. It shows a certain unwillingness to assist your fans and supporters when something so many players utilize is left out of the thought process when making changes like these. To be fair, it's not their job to support modders, but this isn't the only instance of Overkill either accidentally or purposefully screwing over developers in the community. If you've ever gotten into the hardcore side of Payday 2, you've probably heard of a website called Payday 2 Stats. The website allows visitors to track the stats of Steam users that play Payday 2, such as the weapons they own and the heists they've completed. On release of the website, Overkill endorsed it, and it seemed like they were very much behind the idea of something like this existing, so they invited the creator, Tatsuo, to meet with them. In doing so, they discussed Overkill's upcoming FBI files and promised Tatsuo that the service wouldn't be something created to overthrow the Payday 2 Stats website. After the meeting, though, Tatsuo was never contacted again by Overkill despite his best efforts. Eventually, he was able to communicate with an employee, and it turned out that Overkill had made the FBI files to function in the exact same way as Payday 2 Stats. His idea was essentially stolen, even though he was promised it wouldn't be.
Getting paid.
If it isn't clear by now that the people behind Payday 2 can't seem to stay true to their word, Don't worry, I'm not done. Payday 2 wasn't only released on PC, it also came out on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Unlike the PC version though, console players received very sparse DLC and updates. When players attempted to contact one of Overkill's developers regarding the lack of updates, Melanie Schneider, level designer for the project, told them, "If a game I really like isn't working on console, I'd switch to other platforms and fucking play it there." Following up to another similar question with, "Things get cut, that's life, get done with it." Another user had tried to contact David Goldfarb, game director for Payday 2 at the time regarding the DLC, and he compared the hostile tone of one user to negotiating with terrorists. Eventually, they announced the release of Payday 2 Crime Wave Edition for Xbox One and PlayStation 4, essentially an HD remaster of Payday 2 containing most of the DLC released for the PC up until that point. With this announcement came the final nail in the coffin for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 versions of Payday 2. Almir Listo, producer for Payday 2, announced that the consoles just didn't have the power to support the 50 additional content updates that they had been developing for Payday 2 after its release. This of course was followed by more technical issues with the Xbox One's matchmaking and a lack of DLC support, again, despite their full intention to do the opposite. It even got so bad they had to make an apology video.
On behalf of the rest of the team here at Overkill and Starbreeze, we're sorry that it's taking so long getting paid.
At this point, you may be wondering how a developer that sells themselves as community-oriented can be so malicious and untrustworthy to the very same community they claim to support. Well, it's not really their fault. See, Overkill is owned by a separate company, Starbreeze Studios. This company is owned by yet another company by the name of Valve Trey AB. Behind every issue with Overkill this year, behind every singular attempt to turn Payday 2 into a cash cow, the same name always comes up, and that's Bo Anderson Clint, sole owner of Valve Trey AB and now Starbreeze Studios. Even if you're in the Payday 2 community, there's a good chance you've never heard of Bo Anderson Clint. You may have heard of his brother Ulf Anderson, who was also at one point co-owner of Valve Trey AB and co-founder of Starbreeze, as well as the voice actor and model for Payday 2's Wolf. This year, Ulf left Overkill to work on his own projects, and not long after, his brother Bo indirectly increased his holdings in Starbreeze Studios through their parent company Valve Trey AB, which he just happens to own, making him the sole owner of both companies. This singular event was the spark to every other issue that arose with Payday 2 after May 4th. In a press release put out by Starbreeze in 2014, 1 year before Anderson Clint became the sole owner of the company, there were mentions by Bo himself of the company's interest in creating more income sources around the Payday brand through games, merchandising, and spin-off products. He further stated that, as CEO, he can continue to move the company away from a survival strategy and towards a strategy focused on growth, sustained profits, and value maximization. Once he became the sole owner of Starbreeze in 2015, he was free to make the decisions he wanted, and almost all of them involved increasing their profits by any means necessary. The entirely lackluster Bomb Heist and Butcher's DLC were at the fault of Anderson Clint. Updating the 360 and PS3 versions of Payday 2 was no longer profitable, so it was scrapped. Hell, Starbreeze and Anderson Clint are so focused on making the maximum amount of profits from their Payday brand that they bought the Payday Production LLC responsible for a Payday film, just to ensure that they owned all of the rights to the IP, which sort of explains the whole debacle with Payday 2 stats. The development of a mobile free-to-play Payday game was endorsed by Bo. After all of these attempts at maximizing their profits, it's really no surprise that microtransactions were introduced. And with that model being so successful for other games, along with the revenue earned from sales of the DLC alone, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the base game go free-to-play soon. Starbreeze recently signed an agreement with their publisher 505 Games to support Payday 2 until 2017. Stating that there is more free content as well as paid DLC in the works for release. And honestly, at this point, I think the community is getting pretty tired of all of this. There's absolutely not a single thing wrong with a company being interested in earning money for their work. But when they're advertising themselves as loving the community and then doing shit like this, it's hard to care much for their profit margins. I sincerely believe that the developers, the programmers, the artists, and designers at Overkill never intended for things to be like this. I don't think they ever wanted the microtransactions or even the nickel and diming of content to happen. The effects of this entire scheme, all of the problems involved with it, and the backlash from consumers has left a bad taste in everyone's mouths. Gamers who have spent hundreds and sometimes thousands of hours grinding and prestiging and flipping cards to play play the game the exact way they want to are devastated, and with every right to be. Their beloved shooter was changed on them in a major way that they were promised it would never be without any warning. It's scary to think that your hours of devotion can be altered quite literally overnight, be it a casual player or a modder bent on making the game better. The move to add microtransactions has soured the collective player base's opinions of the developers, and with every new package of DLC and every new safe, the overall reception will only continue to get worse. But I think most importantly, in every situation, they went back on their word. They promised people one thing and gave them the exact opposite, and in a lot of ways, I don't think that can ever easily be forgiven. After all of this backlash, all of these shady business moves and attempts to turn a community into a cash cow, I shudder at the thought of just what might happen next.